It was a very long and uncomfortable trip to the farm in the back of that truck. Every bump seemed to rattle my bones new and painful ways, so it was nice when we pulled slowly into the farm. When everyone started to get out, I'm sure we were all looking a bit ragged from the excitement of the drive and everything else. The children were a bit cautious, but still wanted to roll around and play. This made me smile a bit as I helped out of the back of the truck. Calling out to the barn, I yelled that we were here and I brought my friends. There was no answer for a bit, so I dragged myself to the barn to talk to the kids. As I got close, a shot rang out of nowhere. Somewhere. Where was it? This put us all on guard until we heard a scream of something in the fields and the sound of the bulls getting angry. Looking into the field where the cattle were, I could see the bull hit something with enough force to send it through the air. That something looked canine, but the size of a human. That is when the younger bulls came running and hit several of the canine-ish creatures. With each one tossed into the air, they were twisted in ways that showed clear damage to their body. As they hit the ground, the bulls did what bulls do and got on top of them, kicking and goring them until their 2,000 pounds of rage was sure the creatures were just done. It was a hell of a show, with the bulls calmly walking back to the herd. While the bulls finished up, the barn doors opened, and the same kid I talked to stood, almost defiantly, at the door holding a 30-30 lever-action rifle. He had it pointed down, but kept his finger on the trigger. I waved, and he seemed to relax a little, seeing me. But I could tell that he was not expecting me to be as beat the shit out of like I was. Limping over, I shook his hand for the first time and introduced him to the group. He tried to hide it, but he was more than a little happy to see so many humans after all this time. He called out to his group, and they finally got a good look at them all. Aside from the leader, there were 6 children, ranging from ages of 12 to 3. Each of them looked emaciated from having to hide and not being fed right. The ladies said they would take care of that and wanted to warn them not to feed them too much too fast. At least I wanted to, but I didn't have to. Well, because one of the men actually beat me to it. We all moved to the big building where the children were stopped short. We still had to clean up the mess in the kitchen before they could enter. I stayed outside mainly because it was just getting difficult to move. As I sat there, I let the kids fill their curiosity about my wings, tail, scales, and even my eyes seemed to interest them. Though after a moment of looking over a reptile, they seemed more interested in the felines. I kind of chuckled as 2 of the mollies accidentally started to purr from the kids scratching them. I had to be at least a half an hour before we could move inside. I could tell my body was regenerating, but it was sucking a lot of energy out. I had to have a bit of help to get us inside and into the living room. From there, we discussed the living arrangements. Of course, I took the very top, the third floor, with my felines and my feminine dolls, as they were so used to having me around. Plus, I needed the height. Mainly because if anything happened to the felines, could just jump out and land on their feet, and I needed to also be up as high as possible to take to the skies without risking crashing into the ground. The second floor would be for our mostly human portion to stay. The ground floor had things like the kitchen, dining room, and living room, so on, and no one was going to stay there. The mid-sized building would be where the original residents of the land would be staying, at least with one adult for protection. That being the 2-story house, I wasn't sure how they would set it up, though it was decided that the adults would rotate on who would be the one to stay in the house since they didn't want to stay away from the children for too long. The final small house would be given to the kitty couple that still wanted to be separated. For their own reasons, I don't know what they were, though I didn't think that would be a deal for too much longer. She tried to hide it, but there was no doubt that the young kitty lady had a bun in the oven, or maybe a few, we didn't know. It was nearly dark by the time everyone had moved, and we were all settling in. I wouldn't be on patrol this night. It was difficult enough to keep my eyes open during supper as my body continued to fix itself, blowing through energy like crazy. I did apologize to the night guards for not being able to help, but they fully understood. Hell, one of them even patted me on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, we got this. You just go recover, all right?" Which made me try and smile. I still didn't have the capacity to do so. With damaged wings, I had to sleep on my stomach. The room may have had a king size bed, but that didn't leave much room for the others once I spread my wings out. Somehow, they always seemed to find a way, though. As I was drifting off, I could feel them curling up next to my legs or tail, climbing under my wings as though they were a blanket, and even one curled into a ball on the pillow next to my head. I wanted to chuckle at that one, but sleep took me far too fast. When I woke up, it was mid afternoon. My joints cracked as I slowly got to my feet and stretched out. Though a bit refreshed, I could still feel the lack of nutrition in my system playing into my energy levels. Thankfully, they had left a few cups of water next to the bed so that I could at least rehydrate myself. And oh, that felt a lot better. Making my way down the stairs, I could smell something cooking and voices echoed up the stairs. I made it to the base of the stairs where the women were making dinner for everyone. One of the ladies screamed a little when she saw me standing in the doorway. I simply said, "Hi," as the others turned to look. The two female dolls were there and immediately jumped into my arms. I had to support myself with my tail against the wall to keep from falling. I had to ask if something was wrong, and that is when they informed me that I'd been asleep for 10 days. I looked at the girls and assured them that I was all right. After that, I made my way outside. Looking around, I could see that a lot had changed. There was clear repairs done to all the structures, though a bit piecemeal. They were starting to look up for at least. I could hear equipment being run on in the fields, and I got a good look at the fresh hay bales being made. I had to grin because I knew this would get the animals through the winter without a problem. I had to walk over to help since I didn't have any way to get high enough to take to the skies and fly. I was glad that everyone was in good spirits as they pulled the hay wagons to the barn with a pair of horses. Seeing as fuel was becoming a scarce resource, this was the best way to ration it. Although the horses didn't want to get anywhere near me. They damn near broke their harnesses trying to get away. Once we realized this, I took off in the opposite direction. Well, walked off. So the men wouldn't get tore up by getting the horses under control. I went to the barn to see if there was anything I could help with. I guess if nothing else, I could help them stack hay. The first barn where the kids were hiding was already so full I had to go to the next one to go for it. From the look of things, they have had one hell of a productive week. It was at least half full, and when I looked, I just hope the weather holds off until they get the rest in. Since the horses acted up when I got close to them, I used to stack hay bales and then take to the skies. Though a touchy takeoff jumping off the hay bales, it did work. I would have just climbed up the side of the barn, but they just fixed these buildings, and I really don't think they need my claw marks in them. Gliding above the fields, I could see the herd of cattle either grazing or getting a drink from the pond. The fences were still intact, and there was no further damage to the buildings. All in all, everything was looking up, so I decided to go higher. The evening sun was starting to close to the horizon, so I would have to head back soon. Though I wanted to get a good look at the land, I would have to do this quick since my hunger was actually starting to take over, which is never good. I could see a large river in the distance, so I went over top. I could see a rather large fish swimming in it. All I could do was think was, if this is what happens when we don't fish the rivers for a year, then I realized that the run, this was the run for fish to spawn each year. Were these salmon? That meant the normal fishing techniques wouldn't exactly work. They don't eat when they go in. Good thing I'm not normal. Diving down, I landed with both my front and rear talons coming down into the water. With the fish packed so tight, it wasn't surprised that I ended up with 6 fish in that one drop. It took a little work to get them onto the shore so I could process them out. Using my talons, I could easily cut the fish open and pull out their guts. Now, I would be taking almost all the fish back, but the heart, the liver, and roe, well, those were mine. And I was so hungry at that point, I could have easily eaten the whole damn thing raw, but I knew I had others to sustain. Rigging up something to tie together using some of the local foliage, I found my way to a high point so I could take to the skies once again. The fish, slipping and shifting the weight, made the takeoff a bit interesting, but once in the air, I could adjust and fly back. It wasn't until I was about to land back at the farm that I realized that this was going to be my job for a while. I had better find a better way of doing this, though. Landing on the back lawn, I pulled the line of fish off my shoulder and was walking back to the house when something hit me. In fact, it was 3 things. The Mollies had come back after foraging in the woods, and they were so happy to see me. So happy that they knocked me over when they jumped up to hug me. I hugged them back, and we all went inside. The ladies inside were more than a little happy that the fish I had brought. Even though dinner was already made, they would have something fresh for the next day. The thought of fresh fish made, of course, everybody happy. Although I did have to tell the Mollies not to eat them before everyone else. I know, being feline as well as feminine, you know how it is. We all got a chuckle and sat down to dinner. After dinner, I made sure that all my girls were sleeping soundly before I went on night patrol. As I tucked in the mollies, I noticed that they had gone through another change. They were beginning to look even more human. It might have been a fleeting thought, but I would have to ask them about that later. For now, it was going to be a long night of making sure no one and nothing got to my people. Before I took to the air, one of the men handed me the M4 rifle. Though he asked me if I remembered how to use it, I didn't answer. Instead, I showed him by pulling the bolt back, locking it to the rear, clearing the chamber, loading the magazine, releasing the bolt, and double checking the safety. After that, I looked into his eyes and said, maybe a little, though I didn't tell him that I felt strange, or in my talons, it just didn't seem right. He just grinned and went to his spot for night guard. As I was about to take flight, I slung the carbine through around my torso and ended up on the front. I looked at it, and right before I took to the skies, I asked, so what the fuck happened while I was asleep?